WCNC Charlotte Sports Director Nick Carboni talking Charlotte Hornets with our good friend Jeremy Grandison, who was in this very studio last NBA draft night when the Hornets, well, they got some good lottery action there, got the third pick, used it for Con Knipple. That has worked out. But, Jeremy, and you can find him on X at Jeremy Grandison, Grandiso, no N with the one. And he's an NBA contributor for Forecast Sports and Lock It or Leave It. Jeremy, the Hornets get no such luck this lottery. They were slated to probably draft 14th, 97% chance. That is the lottery pick they get. They also have 18. Your initial thoughts on how the lottery fell in general, and then when it comes to the Charlotte Hornets getting 14?
Well, first of all, Nick, thanks for having me on. You know, I've known you for a few years now, started in Charlotte 49ers football, and it's kind of, transitioned to the NBA. So I appreciate you having me on and being a good friend over this time. But overall takeaways from the draft is it was the opposite of last year. Last year felt like the Spurs, who were already tracking to be, one of the best young cores in the NBA, and then the Dallas Mavericks, who had the whole Luka Doncic debacle. They were able to get Cooper Flagg in the draft. The Sixers, who had a pretty good core already with Joel Embiid, who has fought through injury troubles, and then Tyrese Maxey, who's been, a bright star for that franchise, and they got VJ Edgecombe. But this year felt like the small market teams who, let's just say it, were tanking, got rewarded for doing that before maybe the odds switch up and mayhem ensues next year. So for AJ to go to the Wizards, projected to the Wizards, for Dylan Peterson to Darren Peterson to maybe go number 2, I think it's good for these teams like Utah and Washington to finally tell themselves, okay, we're done with the tanking era. Now let's look forward and try to win games in an ever-changing NBA landscape. But for the Hornets, I had the same reaction that Con Knipple had when he was there watching it, which was just a little, not even any,
no movement.
No anticipation, no movement. It was just immediately Hornets 14, let's keep on going. So that was my initial reaction.
Well, there's no change in it, Jeremy. 14 and 18, who jumps out to you there as potential prospects for the Hornets should they stay put at those two top 20 spots?
Yeah, I'd like to start off with, some weaknesses that I think we've all diagnosed from the Hornets the entire season. And something that you and I have been in that post game many times last season and heard was the lack of physicality, how they can be more physical. And my take on physicality is you cannot manufacture it. You either have it or you don't. And we were there with that Miami Heat game that was a thriller, not the play-in game, but the one a couple of times before that where the Hornets lost to the Miami Heat and Tyler Hero had an amazing game. And in post-game, we heard Brandon Miller and Charles Lee and everyone say that they needed to be more physical on Tyler Hero. And I think that if you're a player like Brandon Miller, you might want to be more physical, but you're not an inherently physical player, so it didn't work out. And then for the Pistons, you might want to be more physical with guys like Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren, but if you don't have the guys who can match that, it doesn't matter how hard you try, it won't work. So looking into the draft for this year, I think you really want to look at physicality in guys who already have it rather than trying to manufacture it in other ways.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of party line from Charles Lee after the season was that they can add the physicality by guys lifting weights. And I just, like you said, I think it has to come from outside. There's a lot of core players on this roster that, bring great attributes, and you can see how those could develop even further into being part of a playoff team. But you're right. I mean, I think that physicality at this point does need to come from outside. Jeremy, I'm going to be honest with you, man. 14 and 18 for a team that I think should make the playoffs next year and should compete for a first-round series, it doesn't excite me. Like, I don't know if you can get a guy out of the college ranks or, potentially from Europe that adds that level of physicality in the NBA in a potential playoff setting right off the bat.
Well, I would say that in today's college landscape, too, with the NIL era, you have players who are incentivized to stay a little longer. It's not just your only going for true freshmen, 18, 19-year-olds who aren't having that physical body, who haven't been in a college weight room for some years. So I want to get into my first guy that I have mocked here, which is Dalen Swain. And before I get into these, I want to give a shout out to Matt Alkiza, a good friend of both of ours, who's done a great job writing about this. And he has some great pieces on Sports Illustrated about, who he thinks would be a great fit for the Hornets. But Jalen Swain is one that we agree on because he's a small forward who's 6'8", 7-foot wingspan, and he's been in college for 3 years with the Texas Longhorns, and before that, he was with Xavier. Now, you talked about your trepidation of bringing a guy who can fill that physicality spot so early on. I think Dalen can be that guy. He has the measurables, the attributes, the physicality to do that part the Hornets so desperately need, and he's a downhill attacker who can get to the rim against set defense. We saw that Kobe White was really the only guy in the Hornets locker room last year that could get downhill and put pressure on the rim. When we talk about physicality, it's not just on defense, Nick, it's also on offense. And there's so many times when you're seeing Colin Knippel get to his dribble or take someone off the dribble, and he has 2 dribbles, pulls up for a mid-range shot. Or Brandon Miller, 2 dribbles, pull up for a mid-range shot, but you need someone who can get all the way downhill and finish through contact. I think Jalen Swain would be one of those guys.
All right, I like to have fun. I host an NBA draft show in here, so more fun for me, Jeremy, would be packaging these picks and moving up. How realistic is that? Is that a pipe dream? How high would they need to go? What would they have to give? Who would they get?
I wouldn't say it's a pipe dream, but I would say 14 and 18 is not bad. I think in years past, you look at people who went in that range, Jalen Williams, J-Dub, who went past number 10 in the draft, and he was the second best player on a finals team. A.J. Mitchell on the Thunder right now, who's been honestly the best player in the Lakers series for them, he was picked in the second round. So when you think about 14 and 18, of course you're saying, man, we're not in that top 5, top 6 to have one of those guys, those franchise-changing pieces, but you can do a lot with 14 and 18. However, if you do plan or choose to package those picks, a lot of teams would like to have 14 and 18, I believe. And for that reason, I think you can get up to around the 12 area. The thing about 12, or the thing about 9 maybe, is that guy you're getting going to still fill all the needs you want? Because something that I've written down here is you're not looking for a star player, Nick. You have your core. You have Brandon. You have Con. You have LaMelo. You're looking for someone who can fit around those star players. And I think 14 through 18 or 14 and 18 is a good spot to find those guys.
All right, so then that begs the question, could a move for another player in free agency or via trade this summer be afoot? Could we be getting more Greek around here? We're going to talk about the big headline that dropped on Monday in the NBA coming up here in a minute with Jeremy Grandison. All right, back here with Jeremy Grandison. You can find him on X at Jeremy, Grandiso1, NBA contributor for Forecast Sports and Lock It or Leave It. He's been on with us many times, been in this studio talking NBA draft. We just got kind of done talking about the Hornets' non-lottery luck, getting pick 14 in addition to their 18th pick. But, Jeremy, the big news on Monday dropping, Shams Charania says that the Bucks could potentially extend Giannis Antetokounmpo, or this could end in a trade of Giannis Antetokounmpo. And I think Hornets fans are at the point they think the Hornets are ready to make a move like this. Do they have too lofty of expectations and goals, or is this franchise in a spot right now with all of its assets, with all of its promise to potentially attack an Antetokounmpo deal?
If Giannis were to finish the season healthy and had a full season, I think it's a different conversation. But I want to throw these two stats at you, Nick, because when I heard them on Bill Simmons' pod maybe a month and a half ago, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Number one, there's only been one player, year 14 or later, who averaged 20 and 10 in 50-plus games in NBA history. Only one guy. His name was Moses Malone. He did it twice. He had 20 and 11 in 1988, and then he followed that up with 20 and 12 in 1989. The second stat is guys who have averaged 24 and 10 at 32 years of age or older. Giannis is 31, will be 32 next year. Only 4 guys have done it. Kareem has done it twice. Hakeem has done it twice. Karl Malone has done it once, and Elgin Baylor has done it 3 times. So, Nick, it hasn't happened in 28 years for a player who will be Giannis's age next season to average 24 and 10. Now, if you're the Hornets front office and you are saying, we want to take that leap, we want to go from play-in to a contender in the Eastern Conference, you would be betting against two major historical trends for that to happen. And I think before we even talk about are they ready to make that Giannis trade, the question should be, do you think Giannis can sustain this level of play to make that trade even worth it for the Hornets?
And you would have to pay him too, right? I mean, that's the other thing kind of looming here is a contract extension for Giannis Antetokounmpo. Does that square with the Hornets' kind of window and timeline here?
Absolutely. So Giannis is getting paid $58 million next season in 26-27. Then he's a player option in 27-28 at 62. And then
I think he'd take it, by the way.
I think he takes 62, of course. And then 28-29, he'd be an unrestricted free agent. So it's not just trading for someone who has, 4 years on his deal. He has 2 years left, and the second year is a player option. Now, going back to the question on if going for Giannis is good, I made the case against him. I want to make the case for him now because since winning the championship, he's essentially been giving you 30, 11, and 6 for 5 straight years. And that's something you don't find growing on trees in the NBA. If you have a chance to get a player like Giannis Antetokounmpo, most teams would take that in a heartbeat. But I want to put my Jeff Peterson helmet on right now and ask you these questions, and I'd love to hear your answer. Number one, Nick, was LaMelo Ball playing 70-plus games for the first time since the 2021-2022 season an outlier or the new norm?
I think you have to consider it an outlier until it happens at least one more time.
That's question number one. Question number two, do you think Brandon's injury history are freak occurrences or an indication of what's to come later on in his career?
I'm going to lean that this is not an indication of what's to come later on in his career. I hope, because they've generally been different sorts of injuries. It doesn't seem to be like a LaMelo situation where it is the same exact thing.
And then
am I passing these? Am I passing the test? I don't know. Do I find out after? Okay.
Yes, you will. So if you think Brandon Miller is going to be a healthy player going forward for the most part, then you make the trade. Let's say Brandon is one of the pieces in that trade because the Bucks will have a lot. They'll have a lot of suitors. This isn't just a Hornets-Bucks trade. It's everyone in the NBA is throwing their best offer. Brandon might have to be in that trade. Not saying that he's going to, but he might have to. The third question is, do you think LaMelo Ball and Con Knipple are ready in the next 2 to 3 years to be thrown into the fire of a high-stakes NBA playoff game? Because if I gave you those numbers and stats with Giannis Antetokounmpo at the top, where the only guys who have done it are Moses Malone, Kareem, Hakeem, Carl, and Elgin Baylor, Giannis has a 3-year window playing at that level still. Can the guys around him in LaMelo and Con and Brandon be good enough to make sure you maximize that window for Giannis Antetokounmpo?
I think they're close. I don't know if it could happen in that window. Like first round for sure, but like a deep run, I guess that's where you probably come up to the edge of that window. So I'm a little non-committal on that one.
Yeah, so if you're Jeff Peterson again and you see this Giannis stuff staring you down the barrel and you're like, man, we have a chance to go and get it, part of me wants to do it, right? Part of me wants to say, hey, we go from a play-in team to automatically having the best player in every single series in the Eastern Conference. If you play the Pistons, the Knicks, the Celtics, anyone, you have the best player on the Charlotte Hornets, not the other way around. Is that enough, though? And I don't think it is, which is why I think going after guys like maybe Isaiah Hartenstein or players around that level who can grow with the team going forward might be the better route than pushing your chips into the middle of the table so early on when you have a young core like this in the Charlotte Hornets.
All right, just a couple minutes, Jeremy. So let's go kind of that Hartenstein route. You mentioned him. Are there other players you envision fitting in with this core, but also immediately impacting the Hornets' chances to make the playoffs and compete in the playoffs, and players they could make a move for this offseason? Because remember, I mean, you got 11 first-round picks in 7 years, got a couple of tradable contracts. Like, this, to me, needs to happen sooner rather than later. Some sort of transformational move. Maybe not Giannis level, but something to get this team over this hump now.
Isaiah Hartenstein is, and if you talk to Matt, he'd say the same thing. We talked about this before. He's like the one guy where you're like, man, that he would do wonders for the Hornets because he can fit right into Charles Lee's system as a perimeter passer and kind of fit into everything the Hornets want to do. But for other guys that can bring the Hornets to the level or stage that you're talking about, I want to first say that the Hornets in the last half of the season didn't play like a play-in team. They played like a playoff team. The reason why they were in the play-in is because of the slow start. So let's imagine they're the 7th seed. What player could take you to a first-round series win? Let's push Isaiah Hartenstein out the door. Maybe guys like Bam Adebayo. Maybe guys like, Trey Murphy, who's, I think, a very underrated player on the New Orleans Pelicans, who is kind of being overshadowed by the franchise not being a great spot. I think those are the types of players you should be targeting rather than the next big, massive piece. Because what we've seen in the NBA as of late is organically homegrown teams are winning NBA championships and competing. The Spurs, the Thunder, the Celtics, the Denver Nuggets. These teams who do it the right way are winning, and they're not doing it the way that we used to see in the 2010s.
He loves to cancel plans, but he didn't cancel on us. Jeremy Grandison, thanks so much as always. I'm sure we'll be talking more Hornets basketball with you this summer.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me on. Good to see you.
You got it.